my sister's groom took off my shirt and kissed me. On the day of their wedding, I shouldn't be telling this story, but it's real. It happened, and I still don't fully understand it. I was never close to my sister's fiancé. I always thought he was too serious, too put together, too perfect. But on the day of their wedding, when everyone was running around with nerves and champagne and fake smiles, he pulled me aside. At first, I thought it was just stress, that he needed a breath or a drink or a moment of silence. But then, behind a locked door, with the sound of violins playing somewhere outside, he looked at me, really looked at me, like I wasn't just her brother anymore. And before I could ask what he was doing, he reached for my shirt, undid the buttons, pulled me close, and kissed me like he had been waiting years for that exact moment. What happened next? I still don't know how to explain. Before we begin this story of impossible tension, forbidden desire, and the kiss that shattered everything, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens when the line between loyalty and temptation disappears. This isn't just drama. This is the kind of story that stays with you and might just change the way you see love, secrets, and yourself. Weddings are supposed to be beautiful. Laughter, champagne, family pretending everything's fine even when it's not. But standing there in my black suit, sweating under the California sun, watching the man my sister was about to marry give me that look, I knew something wasn't right. I wasn't supposed to feel it, and he wasn't supposed to mean it. His name was Aiden, 30 years old, sharp jawline, green eyes that could slice through you, and the kind of confidence that made people shut up when he walked into a room. My sister called him the calm in her chaos. I never understood what she meant, until I was standing across the room from him, watching him fix his cufflinks with hands that had no right to tremble. He looked up and saw me, and for a second the noise around us faded. There were people everywhere, florists, photographers, family fluttering around like birds trapped in a dream. But Aiden didn't see them. His eyes were on me, and I couldn't look away. I should have turned, left, laughed it off, but I didn't. Instead, I walked toward him. "You look like you're about to pass out," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He smirked. "Maybe I am?" I raised an eyebrow. "Cold feet?" "No," he said. "Just a lot on my mind." He looked away, then back at me. "Can we talk?" I blinked. "Now? You're getting married in like 30 minutes. "Exactly," he said. "That's why it needs to be now." Before I could answer, he was already pulling me by the wrist, leading me through a side hallway of the event villa, away from the guests, away from the music. My heart was slamming in my chest, too fast, too loud. The walls felt closer than they should. He opened a door and pushed me inside a small room, the groom's suite. Then he closed the door behind him. We were alone. No laughter, no violins, no expectations. Just silence and breath. I turned to him. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at me like he was memorizing something he'd never see again. Then he stepped closer, and closer, and when he reached for the top button of my shirt, my breath caught. "Aiden," I whispered. He didn't stop. His fingers worked carefully, slowly, almost like this wasn't the first time he imagined doing this. One button, then another. I could feel my skin heating under his gaze. I should have pulled away, but I didn't move. When the fourth button came undone, he looked at me, really looked at me. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I can't pretend anymore. Before I could speak, his hand slid behind my neck, and he kissed me. Not hesitantly, not like it was a mistake, like he'd wanted it longer than he'd admit. His lips were warm, desperate, full of something I couldn't name. I kissed him back, for 1 second, just one, and then I pulled away, breathless. "This is wrong," I said. "I know." "She's your fiancée." "I know." "Then why?" He stared at me, jaw tight. "Because I think I'm in love with the wrong person." My heart was a storm. I didn't know whether to scream or run or fall into him again, but before I could choose, there was a knock at the door. "5 minutes, Aiden," someone called. We both froze. Reality hit like ice. He looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry," he said, adjusting his shirt, his voice shaking, and then he walked out the door, leaving me there, shirt half open, heart completely wrecked. I sat on the last row of the ceremony, in the corner, hidden behind a tall flower arrangement. My shirt was buttoned again, my hair fixed, my heartbeat, not so much. I had just been kissed by my sister's groom. 30 minutes before their vows. 30 minutes. I didn't know what to do with that. Everyone around me looked blissfully unaware. My mother cried quietly behind her sunglasses. My father was already 2 glasses of wine deep, laughing with the cousins. My sister stood near the front in her white dress, radiant, glowing, beaming at the crowd like her life was beginning. And Aiden, he was standing at the altar, face calm, hands folded in front of him. But I knew that calm wasn't real, because I had felt the truth just minutes ago, in the way he touched me like he needed to feel something real before everything else became a lie. Our eyes met once, just once. From across the crowd, through veils and flowers and forced smiles, and in that 1 second, the air left my lungs. He looked away. The music started. Everyone stood. And I watched my sister walk toward him, veil over her face, bouquet trembling in her hands. She looked so happy, so full of certainty, and all I could think was, I shouldn't be here. The priest began speaking. Vows, unity, trust. Each word landed like a punch. When he asked if anyone had objections, my throat burned. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My silence tasted like betrayal. Then Aiden turned to her. His voice was steady. "I do." He didn't hesitate. He didn't glance at me. He just said it. Like we hadn't happened. Like I didn't exist. When it was my sister's turn, she smiled so wide it made me sick. "I do," she said. And just like that, they were married. I didn't clap. I couldn't move. The applause around me felt like thunder in my ears. I stayed frozen while they kissed, while people cheered, while cameras clicked and the world spun forward like nothing had happened. Except something had happened. Something I couldn't forget. At the reception, I tried to disappear. I stayed near the back of the crowd, sipping soda, avoiding questions. But Aiden, he was everywhere. Toasts, dances, laughter. Playing the perfect groom with such precision, it made me question if I'd imagined everything earlier. Maybe I had. Maybe I wanted him so badly I made it up in my head. But then, halfway through the night, I stepped out to the patio to breathe. And he was already there. Alone. Looking up at the stars like they could save him. He heard me before I said anything. "You came," he said. I swallowed hard. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Talk to me like this is normal. Like we're normal." He turned slowly. "Do you think I'm proud of what I did? I think you meant it." His silence confirmed it. Then he stepped toward me, too close again. "I've never felt more alive than I did in that room with you," he said. "You said, 'I do,' 5 minutes later. I had to." "No," I whispered. "You chose to." He nodded. "And I'll live with that choice. But it doesn't change the fact that I felt something real with you. Something I can't explain." I backed away, voice shaking. "You can't have both. You can't kiss me and promise yourself to her." "I know." "Then stop looking at me like that." His eyes fell to my mouth again. "I can't." The door opened behind us. My sister stepped outside, laughing with a friend. She didn't see us, but she almost did. And that was enough. I walked past him, back into the noise, the lights, the lie of it all. I didn't look back, because if I did, I'd fall again. And this time, there'd be no one to catch me. I didn't expect to see him again. After the wedding, I told myself it was over. He made his choice, and I had to respect it, even if it meant erasing the memory of his lips on mine, the way he undid my shirt like he'd been waiting a lifetime to touch me. But 3 days later, my sister invited me over for dinner. "Just something small," she said. "Family, close friends. Nothing fancy." I said yes because saying no would raise suspicion. So I went. And he was there. Of course he was. He opened the door when I arrived, smiling like nothing had ever happened. His hair was messy this time. He was barefoot, relaxed, at least on the outside. "Eli," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "Glad you came." I gave him a tight nod. Didn't think I had a choice. He held the door open a second too long. "You always have a choice." I brushed past him. The evening felt like a performance. My sister floated around the kitchen in a new dress, glowing and giggling. Hayden set the table, passed out drinks, kissed her on the cheek like he hadn't kissed me 3 nights earlier. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. At one point, I locked eyes with him across the room. He didn't look away this time. His gaze held mine, firm and loaded with all the things we weren't saying. Later, after dinner, I found myself in the hallway, standing outside the guest bathroom. I wasn't even sure why I went there. I just needed space. Then I heard him behind me. "You okay?" I turned. He was standing too close again. Always too close. "I'm fine," I lied. He stepped forward anyway. "You don't look fine. And you don't look married," I snapped. His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean? You act like nothing happened. Like I'm just some friend of the family." "What am I supposed to do?" he asked, his voice low. "Fall apart in front of everyone? Kiss you in the middle of dinner?" My breath caught. He stepped closer. "No one can know," he whispered. "Not yet. There's not supposed to be anything to know." "Then why are we both shaking right now?" I looked down. Because he was right. I was shaking. So was he. His hand brushed mine. Just barely. A flicker of heat. And suddenly I was back in that small room on the wedding day. Back in the moment when logic left and all that remained was want. "You shouldn't touch me," I said, not moving. "You didn't stop me last time. I didn't know what it meant. And now you do." His fingers touched my wrist again, lightly, slowly. He leaned in, voice quiet and close. "Tell me you don't feel this, Eli. Look me in the eye and lie to me." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But when I looked at him, I couldn't. Because everything in me screamed, "Yes. Yes, I feel it," I whispered. "But it's wrong." "Then why does it feel so right?" Footsteps down the hall. We jumped apart just in time. My sister's voice called from the living room. "Babe, can you grab the wine from the counter?" Aiden's breath caught. He looked at me one last time, eyes torn between guilt and desire, then turned and walked away like nothing happened. Again. And I leaned against the wall, heart pounding in my ears, wondering how long I could keep surviving moments like this before one of us gave in. The next time I saw him was at our parents' lake house, a weekend getaway. My sister's idea. "A little escape," she said. "Just us, the water, no distractions." I should have said no. I told myself I would. But when I found out Aiden was going too, I said yes. I told myself it was for her, for family. But deep down, I just wanted to see him again. The house was big, but not big enough. We were all under the same roof, sharing meals, laughing, pretending like nothing had happened in a hallway days before. But it was still happening. Every time he walked past me and let his hand graze my back. Every time I caught him watching me through the reflection of a window. Every time we locked eyes when no one else was looking. I was drowning in it. On the second night it rained, heavy and sudden. Everyone rushed inside after dinner. My sister went to take a bath. The others gathered in the living room, sipping wine, playing music. I slipped away. I didn't mean to, but my feet carried me down the hallway, past the guest rooms, to the back study. And he was already there. He turned when I walked in. Neither of us said anything. He closed the door, and for a moment, we just stood there, soaking in the sound of rain pounding against the windows, hearts thundering louder than the storm. "I can't stop," he said. "I don't want you to," I answered, before I even thought it through. He crossed the room. This time, he didn't hesitate. He kissed me like he'd been waiting hours to breathe. Like he didn't care if the walls were thin or if someone walked in. I kissed him back. Harder. Hungrier. My hands were in his hair. His lips traced the edge of my jaw, and when he lifted my shirt, I didn't stop him. It was stupid. It was dangerous. It was real. Then, the door handle turned. We both froze. The door cracked open. And there she was, my sister, standing in the doorway, her robe half-tied, hair wet, holding a glass of wine in one hand. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She just stared. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Aiden took a step back, breathless, hands still on my waist. "Wait," he said, his voice cracking. She turned around and walked away. The sound of her footsteps echoing down the hall was louder than any thunder I'd ever heard. He looked at me, eyes full of panic. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "But you wanted it to happen," I said. "Yes." That word hung in the air like smoke. I fixed my shirt. He stood there, frozen. "We have to go after her," I said. But I didn't move. Neither did he. Because deep down we both knew. Something had shattered. And nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. I laid awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what had happened. His mouth on mine, his hands pulling me closer, and then the look on her face when she opened that door. Shock. Hurt. Betrayal. I kept waiting to hear her knock, to hear her scream, to hear anything. But silence reigned. And it was worse than rage. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. My sister didn't come to breakfast. Aiden sat at the table, untouched coffee in front of him, eyes on the wall. Everyone else was clueless, laughing, talking about the storm. Someone even suggested board games. I sat across from him. He wouldn't look at me. Neither of us said a word. It was like the weight of what we'd done had finally landed, and it crushed everything. After breakfast, I slipped away, found the courage to knock on her door. She opened it, barefoot, pale, her hair still damp from sleep, or maybe from tears. "Can we talk?" I asked. She stepped aside. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you," I started. She sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Then why did you?" "I didn't plan this." "You kissed my husband." I looked down. "He kissed me first." She laughed once, bitter. "Oh, so that makes it okay?" "No," I said quickly. "It doesn't. Nothing about this is okay." She stood up, pacing, breathing hard. "How long has it been going on?" "It hasn't. I swear. It started that day." She looked at me like I was a stranger. "You're my brother. He's my husband." "I know." She stopped, looked me dead in the eyes. "Do you love him?" I froze, because I didn't know how to answer. Did I? Was that even what this was? "I don't know," I whispered. She shook her head, disgusted. "You know what hurts the most? That I saw it. Before the wedding. The way he looked at you." I looked up. "You did?" "Yeah," she said. "But I told myself I was being insecure. That I was crazy." I stood. "I'm sorry." She didn't say anything. She just walked to the door and opened it. I understood. She didn't want to hear more. I stepped outside, and Aiden was there, waiting. We locked eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "She knows everything," I said. He nodded. "She asked me if I love you." He blinked. "What did you say?" I told her I didn't know. He swallowed hard. "Do you?" I didn't answer right away. Then I looked at him, really looked at him. "I think I do." He exhaled, shaky, like he'd been holding that breath for days. "I think I do too," he said. But neither of us smiled. Because love didn't fix what we broke. Later that afternoon, my sister gathered everyone in the living room. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she just stood there, calm and cold, and told the truth. "The marriage is over," she said. "Effective immediately." Everyone gasped. My mom stood. My dad cursed under his breath, but I couldn't look at anyone but her. She turned to me, eyes full of fire and something deeper. Freedom. "I hope you two figure out what this really is," she said. "Because if it was just heat, you ruined a lot for nothing." Then she walked out, suitcase in hand, leaving behind the weight of everything we'd all been pretending wasn't real. And as the front door slammed shut behind her, Aiden reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. He could have left. After everything, it would have been easier. Walk away. Avoid the shame. The looks. The blame. But he didn't. He stayed, not as my sister's husband anymore. As mine. We moved. New city. New life. But sometimes the silence between us was louder than any fight. One night he asked, "Do you regret it?" I looked at him. Only how it started. Never what we became. He took my hand, and for the first time, it wasn't a secret. It was love. Messy. Honest. Ours. If you've ever loved someone you weren't supposed to, was it really wrong or just forbidden? Subscribe, like, and share if this story hit you. And in the comments, would you have walked away or stayed.